Hey everybody, welcome back to the internet. I hope you're ready for a good weekend today. So today's stories start off with an entitled parent story called Don't Be Rude to the McDonald's Cashier if you didn't get the Pokemon Happy Meal toy you want, because he controls what you get in the box. Man, that's a loaded title. So I like Pokemon. I also like McDonald's. So when McDonald's decided to release some legendary Pokemon Happy Meal toys, I was ecstatic. They offer 2 different Pokemon every week. So every Saturday, for about a month, I would walk down to my local McDonald's and buy whatever Pokemon figure they had that week. I ended up with Latias, Latios, Groudon, Kyogre, Dialga, and Palkia by the end of the month. You know, I'm probably pronouncing some of those wrong, but I don't even care. The funny thing is, I only originally intended to buy Latias and Palkia because they were my favorite of the selection. I got Latias on day 1, but I spent weeks trying to get Palkia. I bought the rest of the figures each week as to not waste a trip. And the employee started to recognize me. This is important. The next week is when my story happens. I walk into McDonald's and get into the queue. Ahead of me, a woman, let's call her Karen. Oh wait, actually no, let's not call her Karen. Pokemon has a character called Karen and she's really sweet and inspirational. Let's call this woman Debbie. Debbie is in a screaming fit at the poor cashier as she's waving an unopened Dialga figure in her face. Apparently this Dialga is from a previous Happy Meal and she was trying to get it replaced, which is why she had it before she made her order. She says, "What do you mean you don't have any other Pokemons?" "We only have 2 this week, that one and the blue and white dragon." Latios, I'm assuming. She says, "I don't want this stupid horse or dragon, get me a pink one." The employee says, "We don't have..." "Yes you do, I saw a pink one on the TV, so you should have it. I want to see a manager." The employee says, "Look ma'am, the manager would only say the same thing I've said. We only have 2 figurines this week. The pink one that you're talking about is not here because we haven't ordered it in yet. If you want any of the other figures left over from last week..." "I don't care, go look for one." The employee sighs and starts digging around in the basket. His eyes go wide for a moment as he pulls out a Palkia figurine looking as though he didn't expect it to be in the basket. Then he notices me behind Debbie and his face turns into an uh-oh face. Debbie notices that he found a Palkia figure. She says, "There, that wasn't so hard, was it?" He sighs and puts it into a Happy Meal box that Debbie ordered. Debbie smiles smugly and goes to sit down at her table. Instead of grabbing the box and returning to her seat, she expects it to be delivered to her. Typical. The employee goes to take my order. He's like, "I'm sorry, but that was the only Palkia we have. We haven't actually ordered more yet, so that one must have fallen in there by mistake during delivery." I say, "That's fine, I'll just come in next week." He suddenly smiles as though he's thought of something. "So you want a chicken nugget Happy Meal?" I'm just like, "What?" He grabs Debbie's Happy Meal box from the counter and hands it to me. I say, "Whoa, what are you doing?" He says, "I'll just say that you ordered the same thing and that I gave you the wrong box by mistake." So I ended up taking my Happy Meal box home and the Palkia figure inside. So there were some edits that they added later, saying, "Everyone here is rightfully worried about what happened to the employee." So I went back to McDonald's today to find out the aftermath. This is all I remember from a few hours ago when he told me, so the dialogue isn't 100% accurate. Apparently, the employee saw that Debbie had a young kid with her, so he fished out a Latias, the most girly/cute Pokemon from the toy basket, and put it in the box instead. After he delivered the box, Debbie immediately snatched the toy out of the box and was about to let loose a screaming session when she saw it wasn't Palkia. Debbie's kid saw the Latias and opened it immediately and looked really happy with it. The kid says, "It's so cute!" And Debbie says, "What? This isn't the pink one." "I'm sorry ma'am, but someone else ordered the same meal and I gave them your box by accident. I tried to find another pink one, but that's the closest I could get." She looks like if she wanted to huff again, but her kid was happy with the Latias anyway, so Debbie didn't say anything since she technically got the Pokemon her daughter wanted. Well, I can pretty easily see why this came from the ProRevenge board and the Entitled Parents board. Man, I didn't even know they still did Happy Meal toys. I haven't even seen one in a long time. So the next story is from ProRevenge called Take My Flight Home, I'll Take Your Money. So as a new lieutenant in the Army a few years back, I was tasked to be a guest observer at the National Training Center in California. Basically, it's a large desert with small towns for military units to train in before deploying. On day 29, once all evaluations were complete, I was set to fly back to Texas and return to my unit. In the observer/controller barracks, I was approached by a colonel. DFO stands for Dumb Freaking Officer. Says, "Lieutenant Bucks, I'm taking your place on the flight back to Fort Home." I say, "Sir, you're part of the training unit. All of the observers are leaving on this flight, and my bags have already been sent to the airfield. I don't have any changes of clothes." He says, "You'll be okay for a few days. Officers must innovate to be successful." And innovate I did. When I returned to my post, I was unable to locate my gear, including body armor, computer, cold weather gear, and other like items due to the fact that they flew in 2 days before me on a flight I was kicked off. I informed my command and they initiated an inquiry called an FLIPL, which stands for Financial Liability Investigation of Property Loss, in which an investigator is required to determine the reason for loss of government property. The investigating officer determined that I was not at fault and the DFO abused his authority to return home earlier. Additionally, since I was left at the training center for over 30 days, I was due an additional pay for being away for over a month, which amounted to over $1,000. The DFO was found liable for over $7,000 worth of my equipment and had to pay for, which I subsequently found and turned into the central issue facility. I was reissued a new set of kit. I bought myself a nice chair and put the rest into my TSP, which is a government equivalent of a 401k, with the extra temporary duty money, and the loser got reduced to a staff job. Thanks for reading. I don't know a whole lot about being in the military, but it doesn't really seem like a very pleasant place to be. Mainly because everyone's kind of seen as just a tool. But anyways, that's what a lot of people choose to do, so this next one is from Tales from Retail called Ma'am, We're Closed. So I work at a grocery store and we close at 11 p.m. I make closing announcements 15 minutes, 5 minutes, and then at the actual closing announcement. There's this lady who is continuing to shop after we closed. A night crew member goes up to her and says, "Ma'am, we're closed." She ignores him. He says it again. Ignored. He says it again and she goes, "I know," all nasty. So 10 minutes after closing, I decide to call the police to escort her out. The police and the lady are arguing in the parking lot and one of the cops walks up to me and goes, "She's talking crazy." I give him my side of the story, and because she got so aggressive, police had to ensure that she wouldn't come after me or my coworkers as we walked to our cars. Now, I don't care if you need to grab one or two things more after I made the closing announcement, but you continue to shop and then be rude to an employee when you know we closed 10 minutes ago, then it's extremely rude and inconsiderate. P.S. It took an extra 10 minutes to ring up her stuff also. Man, why would anyone be just so set on finishing their shopping that late at night? So this one's a choosing beggars story called Only $5? Oh, sorry, my mistake. So this happened earlier today. I had dropped my daughter off at an event and had about 90 minutes to kill, so I decided to head one town over to pick up a few geocaches that have been taunting me. After my second cache hunt, I parked across the street from a little bodega to see where I should try my luck next. As I'm going through the nearby geocaches on my phone, I noticed a man begging for money from passers-by outside of the bodega. I found a likely cache, then decided to buy a bottle of water at the bodega. So, sidebar, I drive a 2010 Chrysler 300C all-wheel drive. I inherited the car from my mother when she passed away in December 2017. It's not the type of car that I would buy for myself, but it runs well and I have few complaints about it, so I drive it. I left the car, crossed the street, and sure enough the guy asked me for some money, for some food. I was feeling generous and it was a nice day, so I reached into my wallet and handed him a $5 bill. Given the neighborhood, the odds were good that he'd use it for drugs, but whatever. I went inside, bought my water, and left. As I walked out, the man stopped me. He said, "Hey brother, have you got anything else for me?" I said, "Excuse me?" He says, "I mean, you must have lots of money driving that big car of yours." He's like, "Didn't I just give you $5? I said, "Yeah man, but that's chump change. I'll bet you've got plenty more on you right now." I casually take a step back. "So you'd rather have something other than the $5 I gave you?" He said, "Yeah, how about it?" I say, "Sure thing." I say, "Sure thing." I pull out my wallet. "Where's the $5 I gave you?" He hands me back the $5 bill. I take it and say, "I don't know what I was thinking. I'm so sorry." I put the $5 bill back in my wallet. "Have a great day." And with that, I turned and went back to my car. I was about halfway across the street when the guy started yelling at me. I turned and waved, more to make sure he wasn't chasing after me than to goad him on. But he just stood there yelling racist comments at me. By the time I got to my car and pulled away, he was standing on the street cursing me out. I waved and left. Hey, it serves him right. Man, that's pretty funny. I mean, have you guys seen that old South Park episode where homeless are taking over the city? They'll go up and be like, "Oh yeah, here's $20, and then they'll just completely forget that you just gave them money, "You got any more?" It's pretty great when you get to shut them down like that, though. So this one's a malicious compliance called Per Page Quote for medical records. So background, I manage a medical office and we get requests for medical records all the time for various places. Insurance companies and law firms mostly. Our local state's law allows us to charge 75 cents per page for the first 25 pages, and then 50 cents per page for the page 26 to 75, and then 25 cents per page for every additional page. Our office's general policy is to charge between a $10 minimum to a $30 maximum range. We never charge the patients themselves, and capping the fee at $30 means we're providing anything over 48 pages for free. So a paralegal, we'll call her Tammy, at a large law firm faxes us requests for all previous records for a long-time patient who is signing up for a new life insurance policy. I look at the patient's chart, see that there are easily 100 plus encounters, 2 to 3 pages each, 50 plus pages of lab results, countless specialist notes, etc. In under 10 seconds I could see that we're going to be sending more than 48 pages, and I won't need to calculate a per page quote. I generate a bill with our maximum fee of $30 and send it back to the paralegal. 5 minutes later, Tammy calls. She is extremely upset that I did not include a per page quote with my bill and loudly demanded to talk to my manager. I am the manager, I say, and I sent her a bill for $30 because that's our standard maximum fee for records. I think she ignored the maximum part of that statement, as she said it was illegal to not provide a per page quota for the records and demanded I sent her a new invoice. If I didn't, she was going to report us to some type of legal bureau and have us investigated for fraud, or some similar nonsense. Again, I told her that I reviewed her request, reviewed the patient's extensive records, and it was our policy to just cap the total at $30, so I didn't think a per-page quota was necessary. She screamed, "Do your job before I sue you!" loud enough that my coworkers could hear through the phone. I said, "Okay." I generated a new bill for 457 pages of records, or $139.25, and sent it to her with the page count totals included. She calls back, much quieter this time. "We didn't realize the patient had so many records. Can we get the original invoice of $30? I say, "Sorry, you requested a per-page quote. Just doing my job." She hangs up. We get a check for $139.25 the next week, and I never heard from her again. Like, why would it matter that they're not writing up a per-page quote for this kind of thing? I don't know what she was expecting in the end. And now to the big final story from ProRevenge called You Want to Mug Me? Enjoy the wheelchair and permanent brain damage. Okay, to preface this entire effed up story, this all took place 30 years ago. My memory is not that great, so I might get some things wrong. So in 1989, I was a 19-year-old kid living in New York City. I was working as a delivery guy at a dingy hole-in-the-wall pizza place in Hell's Kitchen that's long since gone out of business, and living paycheck to paycheck. I had moved to New York looking for work after my uncle's construction company went under, and had found a tiny crap hole of an apartment which was the only thing I could afford on the salary I got from the pizza place. The only reason I took the job was I needed money, and it was extremely close to my apartment, only a short walk down the back alley. I want you to keep in mind while reading this, the New York of 30 years ago was not the touristy New York of today. Murders were a lot more common, you would see hookers working the corner pretty often, Times Square was a cesspool of nudie bars and porn theaters, gangs would rob people on the subway, and it was almost every day where I lived that you would see a druggie passed out in the alley or along the side of the road. The whole ordeal started just after closing one night in July. The guy who owned the joint, Paulo, said that I could take some leftover pizza home with me that had been sitting under the heat lamp all day. But hey, at least it was free. I had been working at the pizza place for about a year by this point, and I was on really good terms with Paulo and his brother Joseph, who both ran the joint. Paulo was easily pushing 300 pounds, and had a habit of smoking a giant cigar while cooking. Joseph was always in the back, handling the money side of things and taking phone orders. The restaurant had an exit into the alley, which I would take to get back to my place. There would usually be a homeless vet named Alfonso that would sleep next to the hot air vent behind the place who would burn a smoke off me, and we would shoot the crap for a few minutes after my shift. After talking with him, I started to walk home, and after I had gotten quite a distance away from the alley, I heard some bottles rustling behind the dumpster that were right ahead of me. My first thought was that it was some rats, until this crazy-eyed dude swung out from behind it with a hunting knife in one hand and a metal bat in the other. I remember this guy looked like your stereotypical druggie, track marks all over his arms, disgusting clothes on, wild dirty hair, and fidgeting like no tomorrow. He started yelling and half screaming at me to give him my wallet. At that point, my adrenaline was through the roof as I had never been mugged before. I was carrying the pizza box with two hands, and when I shifted it to my left hand to reach into my back pocket for my wallet with my right hand, he started advancing on me. He started muttering to himself, asking what I was doing, and that sort of grunting while jabbing in the air in front of him. At this point, I know this guy is high off his rear on something, or a definite head case. He was really close to me by this point, and before I could take my wallet out, he loaded up his right arm and slashed me across the face with his hunting knife, just below my left eye. At first it didn't really hit me, but I was stunned for a second. It was at that point I started thinking, this is it, I'm gonna die in a freaking alley over $4 I have in my wallet. That's when I decided to start fighting. If I was going down, I was doing it swinging. I threw the pizza box in his face, which made him step back a little bit, and using both hands, I grabbed the bat out of his left hand that he was still holding. I flipped it around and aimed for the outside of his left knee, which was the one closest to me. It connected, and I heard a snap when it buckled inwards. This brought him to one knee, but he started to get back up again like he couldn't even feel it. I swung as hard as I could to hit the left side of his temple, which made a crunch sound before he crumpled to the concrete. I remember being so incredibly scared, absolutely terrified. I don't remember much after this. Years after this happened, when I went to see a psychiatrist for other reasons, and this was brought up. And she told me that it's likely my mind was trying to shield me from the trauma of the whole experience. The next thing I remember is being soaked in blood and standing above this guy. I knew he was still alive, as he was gurgling blood out of his mouth, and his chest was still rising and falling. There was blood coming out of his ears, nose, and mouth. His right hand and arm had been the one holding the knife, and was a mangled mess with fingers jutting out every which way, with the knife that was a good 4 feet away on the ground. I dropped the bat and half stumbled, half walked back to the pizza place. Alfonso heard the screaming and came to look. He told me that I had a glazed over look to me, and I was almost entirely soaked in blood. He led me back to the pizza joint, where Joseph called the cops, and Paulo grabbed a bottle of cheap Prosecco we had from below the counter to douse my slash with, while stemming the bleeding with table napkins. I spent the night in the hospital because apparently I was disoriented and so confused I didn't know where I was because of the blood loss. The next day I was doing better, and there were 2 cops that came in to take my statement. After I had told my side of the story, the older looking of the 2 cops said that after 10 years on the job, that guy took the worst beating he'd seen anyone take and survive. The younger looking one started telling me what I had done to the guy, which included severed knee ligaments, broken and dislocated fingers, broken ribs which had a punctured lung, a broken femur, multiple crushed and pulverized bones, a severed spinal cord with a couple broken vertebrae, a burst eardrum, multiple teeth knocked out, completely fractured jaw, a broken nose, a burst eye, a destroyed eye socket, and a completely destroyed cheekbone. He also told me that I hit his skull so hard that there was spinal fluid leaking out of his ears. They said that they had spoken to Alfonso, Paulo, and Joseph, and they corroborated my story that the bat was the junkies, and I had most likely acted in self-defense. Although I had no answer to their questions of why I didn't stop after he went down besides, I don't know, and I don't remember. After a couple days I was discharged, and after just a while I was back working at the pizza place. Although I now have a massive scar running down the side of my face, and Paulo jokingly calls me Scarface all the time. Even now I jokingly say to my wife before sexy time, "Say hello to my little friend," which we still giggle maniacally about together. I was also super jumpy right after the fact whenever I heard bottles clanking together, which unfortunately happened a lot because Joseph used to take empty Coke bottles to the recycling plant at the end of every week. What made me tell this story here is that recently I thought about how much of this junkie's blood might have gotten in my mouth or in the slashes across my face. At the time it happened, the whole HIV/AIDS panic was in full swing, and the guy being a junkie instantly made me realize how much crap I could be in. If I was infected without knowing, I could have passed it on to my wife or even my children by accident. After quite the panic between me and my wife because of overlooking this, we got the blood results back just a bit ago, and thankfully I'm completely clean. My doctor said that if I was infected back then, symptoms would have likely manifested by now as well. So there, that was my incredibly long-winded story about one of the scariest events of my life, and the resurgent panic it brought up just a bit ago. So TLDR, I used to work in a dingy pizza place, was slashed across the face by a mugger, beat him half to death, got a cool scar, and 30 years after the fact had a panic that I might have gotten HIV. Well, that is definitely not the type of story I usually tell on this channel, but I hope you guys still enjoyed parts of it. You know, while I do think it sounds exhilarating to fight back against a mugger, I feel like my best bet would just be to take off running, because it's better to get away uninjured than to risk it, in my opinion. Anyways, that does it for today's stories. That was quite the wild ride for today. So, thanks to everybody for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later.